This is the brand new Nintendo Switch Lite, coming in at $100 cheaper and in a smaller compact footprint. Makes this the perfect gaming device for gamers on the go. But this thing is kind of pushing it with the compromises, so let's take a closer look. If you've ever seen the Nintendo Switch box, you'll notice right away that the Nintendo Switch Lite package is significantly smaller, since we don't have to worry about the docking accessories and of course, the small overall footprint of the Lite. The form factor has changed quite a bit, and you can even feel and hear the difference in material. The Switch Lite is a bit more textured and feels really nice to the touch, but my only concern is the possibility of this shining over time, but we'll have to wait and see. The shape of the Lite is quite nice. I really like the way that your middle finger just fits into the contours of the shoulder buttons and how your thumbs naturally fit onto the face buttons, and it feels really comfortable. The Joy-Cons are now integrated into the body, which I'm liking a lot because it makes the console feel so much more solid, and it's a nice change compared to my day one Switch, which has considerable flex. But the most annoying part for me on the original Joy-Cons is actually the locking mechanisms. After prolonged use and a few careless removals on my part, the plastic starts chipping away, making it really easy to pop the controllers out during heated gameplay. This is obviously no longer a problem. The static controllers aren't the only things that have changed. We now have an official D-pad, no mods required, which would be amazing if it didn't feel a little mushy. It feels like the center support of the pad isn't quite long enough, so when you push down, there's quite a bit of give. It feels kind of like my Gen 1 DS Lite, and I think a clickier D-pad from the 3DS or the 3DS XL, even the D-pad on the GBA, feels a little bit better than this. The pad felt fine in platformers like Shovel Knight and Mario, but in Tetris 99, this D-pad felt, I think, about in the middle for me. I prefer the distinct button presses from the clicky Joy-Con buttons for precision, but definitely like the Lite D-pad over the Pro controller, because I swear, if you can get through a match on a Pro controller without accidentally hard dropping, you are a godly Tetris player. Finding games is where this D-pad kind of falls apart for me. Combos that require diagonal inputs are noticeably less consistent, and the membranes under the pads don't reset the controls that fast, making it feel a little bit sluggish. So while I do like that Nintendo has listened to the community and added a D-pad, I do wish it was better, and it's a shame too, because we know that they've had some really good implementations in the past. The tactile feel of the buttons have also changed. The shoulder buttons are still clicky, but the ZL, ZR, and the face buttons now have moved to the membrane design as well. But unlike the D-pad experience, they actually feel quite nice in their own way. They actually kind of remind me of the DS Lite and GBA buttons if you're familiar with those consoles. With the redesign, we've also lost two key features that made the Joy-Con unique. The IR camera, which wasn't really a big deal unless you're really into niche games like 1-2 Switch and Labo, but we're also losing HD rumble without any form of haptic feedback to replace it, and to me this is really unfortunate. Games just don't feel quite as immersive anymore. Golf Story, which plays and feels even better thanks to great HD rumble implementation, now feels a little dull. And in games that really benefit from rumble like Mario Odyssey and Mario Kart, it's just straight up disappointing. I know there's a good chunk of people that don't really care for the rumble feature, but for me, I really wish that Nintendo had put in some sort of rumble replacement. It didn't have to be as nuanced as the HD rumble, but really, to me, anything would have been better than nothing. A more obvious design change is the screen size. It is still the same 720p resolution, but in a smaller 5.5 form factor. This results in crisper images, but the trade-off is that the text is slightly harder to read. Nintendo does have a zoom in feature that you can enable in the settings, so do remember to set that up if you're having issues. The color profile of the panel seems to be slightly different from the original Switch as well. The Lite has noticeably warmer tones compared to the much cooler first gen. Another compromise that has come up due to the form factor is that there isn't enough room for a brightness sensor anymore, so those settings are now manual, just like in the 3DS and DS days. They did, however, have room for big bezel still. Sure, the ratio isn't as drastic on the first gen, but still larger than most people had hoped for. Speaking of bezels, if you take a closer look, you'll notice that there's no longer exposed ports for the front-facing speakers. They now fire downward. So the sound is a bit softer and less direct. Here is a quick comparison of the two switches. Right next to the speaker is the USB-C port. Like the original Switch, it could be rapid charged with the included charger or any battery bank or wall wart that supports USB PD. You can even plug in USB-C dongles to take advantage of accessories like the GameCube controller hub. As for video out, it's a no-go. The Switch Lite just doesn't have the hardware for it. The key feature of the Lite is mobility, so having decent battery life is incredibly important, and so far, I have no complaints. The battery of the Lite falls right in the middle of the Gen 1 and Gen 2 switches. The Lite is officially rated at 2.5 to 6.5 hours, and from what I've seen, averages about 2 to 3 hours of gameplay on intensive games like Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and Smash. But it is noticeably longer with less intensive 2D games like Golf Story and Slay the Spire. For my average commute and downtime during work, the Lite's battery life was perfectly adequate. Powering the hardware is the same software found in the original Switch, with some defaults tweaked like the manual brightness controls and the disabled rumble feature, with other OS quirks that don't quite fit the hardware. But if this is your second Switch, then you'll feel right at home, and if you're new, don't worry, everything is pretty intuitive. One key software detail that you do need to know about is how primary and secondary consoles work and how it affects the behavior of the eShop downloaded games. Primary consoles have the ability to play eShop purchase games offline, while the secondary device has to radio home every few hours to validate the game. For a person with the original Switch and the Lite, it makes more sense to have the Lite as the primary since this is the device that's going to be mobile and away from internet access, and that's exactly how I have mine set up. Primary consoles also have priority. So if a primary device is playing Zelda from the eShop, for example, by the way, this doesn't affect official carts or physical carts, and a second Switch also tries to access the same eShop game, it gets denied. However, on the flip side, if a secondary device is the one playing Zelda and the primary tries to boot it up, the second device will automatically get kicked off. So how are priorities set? Essentially, the first console to sign into the eShop on a given account will automatically be assigned as a primary console. If the Lite is your first console, then you don't have anything to worry about. However, if you're like me and have a Gen 1 Switch, there are two ways to reset the priority. You can access the eShop on the original primary Switch, deregister there, or you can do it on the website, with one limitation. On the website method, you can only do it once a year, probably to curb some shady account stuff that we haven't thought of. So with everything configured and using this Lite for a week now, I have some thoughts. For context, I'm in the smaller majority of users that primarily use the Switch in handheld mode, not console mode. So with that in mind, the use case of the Lite is actually perfect for someone like me. When I'm on the go, I think the Lite is much better, and I think most people will agree with me on this point. Unless you're constantly playing multiplayer games that need a ton of controllers with you, I found the size of the Switch Lite to be much more convenient, and I actually brought it out with me a lot more often now just because it's not as daunting to carry along. If you look at my Switch case, which I'm sure a ton of you have a case of similar design, it is massive and it takes up so much space in my backpack. Yeah, you can carry a ton more stuff inside with plenty of room for multiple Joy-Cons, but honestly, I rarely have a need for all of this in my day-to-day. Maybe once or twice during vacation, but that's about it. The Switch Lite with its smaller frame and interesting slim hard cases coming out, like the one here on Amazon, the mobile experience is just way better. And for me, I'll be using it on the go exclusively. When I'm at home, it's a little bit more complicated. I found the lighter Switch to be easier to play and hold in bed, and I initially thought that this could potentially outright replace my Gen 1 Switch. However, to be honest, I've been going back to my original Switch just because I miss the HD rumble feature so much. So it's really important to take a look at both Switches and decide which of the features you can and can't live without. Which Switch should you buy? The breakdown in most situations is pretty simple. If you have the cash and want the full Switch experience, then it's an absolute no-brainer. You want the V2 red box Switch. But even if you do have the cash, if you plan on primarily using it on the go or don't see yourself playing or taking advantage of local multiplayer very often, I would still recommend giving the Lite some consideration and thought. If you're price conscious, then that's also a no-brainer. The lower price Switch is the way to go. I think I saw it on Rakuten for $170 US already. And finally, if you already have a Gen 1 or Gen 2 Switch, then you're gonna have to assess your situation a little bit more and come up with your own answer. Sorry guys. I personally found having a second Switch very convenient, but also feeling a little guilty since I had a perfectly working console. So yeah, you'll have to decide for yourself. The last thing I want to talk about is that I know a lot of people are disappointed that this isn't the Switch Pro, and I think this was a really smart move for Nintendo from a business perspective. With the holiday seasons coming up and coming up very fast now, with a huge void in the budget tier left behind by the 3DS, this release puts them in a very strong position not only for the holiday season, but into next year as well. When you pair that with the heavy hitter game launches like Witcher 3, Overwatch, Luigi's Mansion 3, and of course Pokemon, Nintendo is probably going to push a lot of these consoles, and the Switch Lite is going to be a core pillar in their business model going forward. And with that, let me know what you guys think of the Switch Lite, and if you're planning to pick one up yourself. Also leave a comment down below if you think I should keep this gray one or pick up the Pokemon one that's coming out in November. I can't really decide right now. I'm really liking the gray, but the Pokemon one does look really great. Anyways, like, subscribe, it really helps me out, and I'll see you guys next time.